Based on the previews for this week's episode, a lot of us were led to believe that it was going to be just another sort of standalone side story. Mando's ship's damaged. He needs to go get it fixed. We knew Carl Weathers was directing the episode. We thought, it'd be a fun little episode. He'd get to direct, and, that would be that. That was not the case. What we ended up with was one of the most lore-heavy, biggest plot-pushing episodes of the series thus far. You would probably have to go back to the finale of season 1 to find an episode with this much sort of pushing the story along. I was shocked. I literally was surprised that that's what we got. It's everything I wanted it to be in terms of an episode of The Mandalorian. Initial reactions, guys.
I was expecting an All in the Hips reference, or a crocodile coming in and eating his hand. But the entire episode felt like what I've come to like about this show. It's, it has nothing to do. It ended up kind of tying in with the Force a little bit, but it's not Force heavy. It is very Mandalorian versus everyone else. And then, from the first season, he established these relationships, which kind of have helped him progress, throughout this season. It's, he's looked to this person for help. He's looked to these other people to help him, accomplish these goals. So these people tie him back in. I was just like, okay, it'll be cool with seeing Cara Dune and, old Carl Withers again. But it was not just that. It was very fast paced. I watched it on my lunch break, and by the time I was done, I was like, oh shit, my lunch break's up. I was never bored. I was, trying to pay attention to certain parts. I think I called you, Brian, right at the end because I was trying to watch it in my car on my phone, so I didn't get the best view of some of the stuff. But from beginning to end, I was entertained the whole time, and it was good. The dialogue was great. I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree, and I was very surprised. Like you were saying earlier, I kind of thought that this would be, if anything, a one-off and an unimportant one, where we might meet some characters that we'd follow up with later. But man, did this one seem important? And we even got Moff Gideon coming back in this episode, so it was a big one. And it was surprisingly plot heavy for something that I thought was going to be a throwaway episode. And, I wouldn't be surprised if, given, like you mentioned before, that I think most of the audience kind of expected that if the ratings were potentially a little lower for this one until people kind of found that out, just maybe the initial ratings for today. But yeah, there was a surprising amount of action, and given the amount of action, it was surprising how relevant it was.
Yes, this is the way to do that kind of storytelling. Welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Spencer and Larry. Yeah, we're discussing The Mandalorian, Chapter 12. It's Episode 4 of Season 2, titled The Siege. Hit that likes, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff if you haven't yet. A lot of cool content on the channel. The Undoing. We're doing Big Sky now. Well, me and Spencer are.
Y'all can
Fargo.
Have
we have 2 more episodes of Fargo. Where the hell is that going to go? And we have some surprises for December. We have a lot of content on the way, so please hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Yeah, Larry, you were about to say something.
Well, yeah, I was. It's just, and I don't even recall what it was now, but but it was surprising where we went with this. Just they're like I wasn't expecting the follow up with these characters yet, and I kind of felt like they would be the last minute call-ins for the last few episodes of the season. And I'm definitely surprised we got a character from episode 1 of the Mandalorian,
we did,
of all things. Because and when they in the previously on section before the episode started, when they were flashing back that scene, I was like, okay, why is this bar scene important? That character shows up because clearly they're trying to build a team dynamic between where you have your the Mandalorian, our main character, our lead, and we have Cara Dune, who's your tough warrior type, and I cannot remember the name of the gentleman who hands out the bounties and whatnot.
Grief. It's like Grief Karga or
Grief
something.
Karga.
Carl Weathers. I just call him old Carl. But yeah, Carl Weathers, who also, like I said, directed the episode.
Yeah, he's your rogue, and you brought in the Fishman from the first episode as sort of your brainier character, who's not exactly combat adept. Yeah, it's very tropey, but it worked in a good way. And and now I do remember what I was going to say. I think I mentioned it before. Like, I know we say that this is what the smaller Star Wars series should be, but this episode kind of highlights what the movies should be like, in my opinion. At least
Wow.
pacing wise, level of action. This is what the movies need to be. This is the feeling that we need to get from these movies.
That's a good point. I agree 100%.
It was very cohesive in a way that the movies aren't anymore.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. No, you're right. I was shocked by the action sequences of this episode, how good they were. Full spoilers ahead, by the way, if you don't know. We're going all throughout, and we're going to jump into the ending right now. But the setup of the episode was simple. Okay, his ship's messed up. He's got to go get it fixed. He's going to go to his old friends because he can trust them. They're going to fix his ship. And of course, they need a job done in exchange. There's a little Imperial base. A handful of guys might be there. We're just going to blow it up. Simple. Okay. We get halfway into the episode, and shit gets crazy because all of a sudden we're looking at these tanks. And we're probably going to be talking about this for a few minutes here because there's already a lot of theories online as to where this storyline is going. But within these tanks, we realize, okay, this is a scientific facility, and these are the Kaminoan guys, and they're doing experiments, and Baby Yoda, or the child, they were using its blood and the M count, which I love that they said M count as opposed to midichlorians, but that's clearly what they're talking about, to engineer fuse it with these people, or these clones, or these humans, or whatever they were. They look really deformed. They looked a lot like a character we saw in tanks in the last Star Wars film, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of people are wondering, maybe this sets that up potentially. So I'm just going to lay out what I think, and then we can go from there. Clearly, they're trying to create Force-sensitive soldiers of some kind. That's my thought. We get the big reveal at the end, like I said, full spoilers. Those are straight up Dark Troopers, no question about it. Now, what form they are, I don't know. Those are probably just the droid versions. But if you've read any of the EU, the Legend stuff, there was a version of Dark Troopers which were people who had Dark Force powers, basically. Is that where Gideon's going with this? Is that his goal? What do you guys think?
Well, that's what I called you about, because I couldn't tell. It looked, when I was looking on my phone, when he walked into that corridor, it looked like a bunch of Vaders. And I was like, I know that they're not cloning Vader, which would be crazy. I was actually like super excited for a second, but then I got a closer look and I was like, that's not the same.
Wouldn't it be some shit if they were? That's exactly what they were doing. If they were trying to replicate Anakin.
That'd be so crazy. Like, but so it took me a second. Then when you told me, we discussed that the whole lore behind the Dark Troopers and stuff. And I think that Moff Gideon, I don't know if he's acting upon his own accord or if he's acting within some kind of new order agenda. I don't know, because clearly if he has the Darksaber also, which they've made a big deal about, he is way more feared, respected, and everything amongst not just the Empire, but the remnants of the Republic. So he himself is a feared figure. So I don't know what it is that his end game is, but this seems to be a huge part of it.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I was wondering that myself. Like the Snoke thing. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was thinking that myself. I'm like, wait a minute, is he cloning Snokes? Is that what's going on here?
I don't know that he's cloning Snoke, but I think what they're doing will lead to that. In other words, I think this is sort of maybe the origins of where that goes. I'm just speculating. because I mean, look at the way they looked. It was, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Like, I was like, that's too familiar.
Yeah, but
yeah,
we said that too from the get go. Is that the cartoons helped make the prequels better. I think that John Favreau and just Disney in general is trying to use platforms like the Mandalorian and perhaps some of the spin-off shows to make the I don't want to say the new trilogy. They're trying to make that more viable. They're trying to make it make more sense. So if they do little one-offs like this or shows like this, it can make all of it better. You're kind
yeah.
of fleshing out the story a little bit more.
It seems to me that maybe where they're headed to, that they're trying to tie all these things together in a way that makes sense. And like you've mentioned, the Clone Wars cartoon and Rebels and things, they they kind of form a connective tissue between the movies that fill in certain plot holes that you didn't understand before. Like that'll take a lot of work for the most recent trilogy, honestly, because those three movies vary so wildly. Like, but that may be the direction they're going in. Uh, is like I'm curious if he is on his own, what direction he's going. If he's not cloning Snoke's here, if he has his own agenda, if potentially Gideon himself is a force sensitive to some degree, or and if this is just sort of his own sort of faction that he's spun out of the remnants of the Empire, or if this will go on to be the First Order. It's kind of hard to say at at this point, but I was also very interested in, like Brian said, what appeared to be dark troopers, and I thought at first, okay, are those dark troopers? And then then I noticed, like you noticed, that they look a little droid-like. They seem to be droids, and someone seems to be working on them. So yeah, I'm imagining it's the droid version of Dark Troopers, and I imagine that's at least going to come into play by the finale of this, at least. And it makes sense for all these little pieces to be coming together like this, because you think, man, this is a little much for the Mandalorian and his little crew of misfits to handle on their own. But we're getting to a point in the series where, at least for a period of time, there will be Jedi, or at least there will be a Jedi involved. And one of my thoughts that I had today before I even watched the episode, even though I knew this wasn't the episode where we were going to get that, was it's like, well, how is this show going to create a viable threat for Ahsoka, or at least the version of Ahsoka that's out there now, given how powerful she is?
That's a great point, because the whole point of the Dark Troopers in the EU was, the Empire has fallen. At this point, their numbers are low, so they need basically they need elite troops. Where instead of having 1,000 stormtroopers, we have 10 elite guys that can get it done, and that's sort of the idea behind these super droids or these dark force infused stormtroopers. That's the point. So you're 100% right. That's exactly what I think they've set up, a threat for a character like Ahsoka, who's way overpowered to be dealing with these common stormtroopers. And I think, this is going to be that threat. Spencer, you bring up a great question, and I haven't even thought of it, and I want both of you guys, your opinions. Is Gideon the highest ranking official in the Empire, or is he serving somebody? That is a great question. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, is he the sole leader? If so, why is he calling himself just a Moff? Why hasn't he declared himself emperor? Or is he seeking out, or thinks there is somebody that should be in charge? Or is there somebody in charge?
That's
Well,
one thing I've been wondering. Yeah.
well, when you look at the episode 9, they established that Palpatine is still around. Like he is still, his we talk about cloning, and even in the EU where Palpatine cloned himself, and Dark Empire, and
Do
all
you
these
think the
things.
Emperor makes an appearance?
That would be fucking fantastic. But I think that may be what happens. I mean, they established in episode 9 that he is still around. He's still pulling the strings. And this would help kind of flesh out the Snoke story. There's a lot of things that would help that, but I think that Gideon may be taking direct orders from the Emperor, and kind of like a shadow government type thing. I don't think that people are supposed to know that the Emperor is still around at this point.
No, it's sort of a Sith, like you said, shadow organization, which is somewhat what they established in the Rise of Skywalker.
Well, and I'll put it
If
this
he's
way.
taking orders from the Emperor, that's who it is.
Well, and I'll say this much too: whatever he's established, this group, they're not just loyal. If it's not him, they're either very afraid of him or they're very afraid of someone else. Because from what we've seen in these last few episodes, they're not just loyal to the Empire. They don't just like the idea of the Empire. That's not just their preferred system of government. They're full on zealots because they're willing to die. They're so afraid of the consequences. They'll kill themselves.
Long live the Empire. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the guy on the ship, just biting down on that little tablet of whatever that electrocuted him.
And he looked older, therefore he was fighting in all those wars. He was probably in those battles of the first and second Death Star. That's somebody who's probably been in the game a long time and yet was willing to end his life to protect information.
Well, yeah, and let's not just forget how suicidal almost some of the actions were of some of the troopers in this episode. The two on the speeder bikes who were clearly needed to take that a little slower, but
that was, I rewound that. It's very well animated, like that way.
It is. It really is. Like, yeah, it was humorous at first, but then I was thinking to myself, like they just don't seem like they're just incompetent idiots, which they kind of often are, being stormtroopers. But they seem like they're afraid of the consequences of what would happen if they didn't speed down that cliff with all those jagged rocks and everything.
Well, I looked at it. There's different troopers. Like when you look at all the episodes, there's, the snow troopers. There's the ones that use the flamethrowers. There's like so many different troopers. Like the speeder bike, the scout troopers have distinctive armor. There's, different pilots. So these look like two regular stormtroopers that probably had no idea how to even use the speeder bike. And they're like, we're going to get them. They're like, trying to earn the respect of Moff Gideon because they wanted to be the ones to catch, Well,
they had like the speeder trooper helmets and stuff, right?
I think the two that crashed did.
I don't know if all of the one in the finally died did, because his helmet falls.
Yeah, his helmet falls off.
Absolutely. Now, whether or not all of them did, I did not freeze it enough to see. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's my thing. They seem very desperate, and they don't just seem to be clinging on to the idea of the Empire alone. There's something else there. There's fear.
The Kaminoan scientist in the video, his last thing he says, and keep in mind, it's not even his fault. He's doing these experiments. It didn't work. He didn't have enough of a sample. And his last thing he says is, he apologizes to Gideon. It won't happen again. You know what I'm saying? You're right. If you really pay attention to the dialogue and these Imperials, and he's not even an Imperial, I don't think. I think he's just working with them. These guys are very much afraid of Gideon, and they look at him as more than just a guy, more than just a boss. Which is what I think he's in. Like I said, I think he's in charge. He may be answering to the Emperor or something. I don't know, but he's clearly the one calling the shots. Would you want their? I know, Spencer. You said, I guess you do. Do you, Larry? Would you want the Emperor involved in any capacity on this show?
On this show, no, not really. I'd want that to be the sort of thing. Like if you're spinning off another show that should have a grander scale, then maybe. If anything that's involved with the Emperor, I'd want it to be the sort of thing that's not necessarily the Mandalorian's problem, or at least he doesn't feel like it's his problem. Like if we're getting our Ahsoka show or something, then yeah, maybe you can do that. If we're getting something Jedi focused, if we're getting something that's on a grander scale and involves maybe, more, I don't know, space politics or something, then maybe. But for this,
to be or the Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's a little out of his depth,
Yeah, the Sith God. Yeah,
right. Now you could do something like in the, what was that recent Star Wars game that everybody liked? I know we enjoyed it.
Fallen Order.
Fallen Order, yeah. Now, if you had him involved for a brief minute, and I wouldn't make him the focus of the show, you could play it very much like a certain scene in Fallen Order where our main character is fighting a Sith that is way beyond him, and it just seems like a horror movie, and he's doing everything he can to survive and get out of there, and surviving is the miracle. If you want to play it that way for an episode or so, that'd be fine. But other than that, I'd like to see this stay very grounded. Stay sort of a space western.
The action sequence we've been talking about it, starting with the speeder. To me, this was maybe my favorite action sequence of the series. The only thing I would maybe put ahead of it barely was the season finale's big battle. But between the speeder chase, the gang racing away, did you notice what Carl Weathers, a hell of a job directing this. I believe Favreau did write it, but they basically recreated the A New Hope TIE fighter attack on the Millennium Falcon, but it's speeders. Because he gets in the thing and and they're coming around him, and you know what I'm saying? I was watching, I was like, holy shit, they're like recreating those space battles, but they're doing it from a speeder point of view. He even had the same, lock-on system and everything. And then the final shot, where he blows up the guy holding the bomb on the top, and the big explosion, which is that final shot where they blow up the TIE fighter. And I don't know, I just caught that. I was like, wow, that's fucking cool. Like, it was just really cool the way it was done. And then they bring actual fucking TIE fighters in that scene, and then we get the cool Razor Crest battle with them. I love the whole thing. I thought it was really well shot, from them getting into the vehicle to flying down the hill to just the whole production of it. That's like you said, Larry, that's what we need in the movies. Like,
yes,
that kind of edge and that style of action.
It was the style of action. It was the fact that it wasn't like they just pulled some sort of schlocky, big budget scene out of nowhere. It's like there was love put into that, like there was a lot of effort. And I did notice that it was kind of recreating that when the scene was happening, but it was a very, very impressive scene. And during that whole time, from the minute the infiltration failed and they were kind of under siege, everything from that to the dogfight had you on the edge of your seat. And the build up to that, the plot that led you there in the first place, and how well everything fit and tied together and made sense. That's what we need from the movies, because it made sense why it was happening, and the action made sense, and nothing fell out of the scope of the abilities of characters.
Almost as if they outlined everything. Maybe.
Yeah, like there was a cohesive outline. It's almost like they checked, like did their research on these characters, what they'd be capable of, thought up a good idea for everyone to fit where they are. It just but I won't go too much into that because then we'll be talking about what's wrong with the movies for hours.
Well, I think that, and this is not movie related, so I didn't mean to phrase it like that. I love that Carl, when he was looking, for the speeder bikes, like when he was checking, when he's like, I lost him. It, like you said, Brian, it felt like A New Hope, like the whole thing. And I was so enamored with that fact that it recreated something that it recreated it without basically reinventing it. Like, it was so well done that it was so nostalgic, and it made me like, reminiscent and happy. Like, I really liked how they did that. It
reminded me of in season 1 when the Mandalorian is on the Jawa's vehicle and he's hanging on the side and everything. That was very much like Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, where Indy's on the tank. Mm-hmm. It's like, what I'm saying? The way it's shot and everything, it's very, very similar. And it gave me those vibes like they were, recreating very that.
Spielberg-y.
Yes, very Spielberg. And so this was, like I said, it just was sort of cool that they were taking that same kind of battle but putting it on the ground, and it worked brilliantly, I thought. Well, let's talk about the blue guy. We brought him up briefly. He's at the beginning, the first episode of the series. He's working for, he's paying off his debt in 300 years or whatever because he screwed Carl Weathers or a grief Karga out of money. He's sort of the comic relief of the episode. He survives. He's throughout the whole thing. You know, I was curious what they were going to do with him at one point. It was fine. There was a few lines of dialogue I didn't love. I thought like they were making the point that he was sort of, you know, their bitch, if you will, but then it kept going. You know what I mean? They kept harping on, you will do what I say, you'll do what I say. And I don't know, I think I would have cut a couple of those lines out. It's something that did stick out to me a little bit. It's not a huge gripe, but I might have trimmed some of that dialogue down, personally.
Well, almost like they were bartering with him to cut down his time.
Yeah.
Which I didn't hate, but like you said, when you did it repetitively, it felt like they were.
It started to feel mean a little bit.
It was kind of cold-hearted, but you know, I feel like they're building to an episode where he's kind of paid off his debt, and yet he helps him just out of the goodness of his heart.
Maybe, yeah, there may be
where he kind of becomes part of the crew. Yeah, you know, and you know, and they made it clear, but you know, on the other side of that argument, what they're talking about, from what they're saying, he stole a substantial amount of money from Grief, and you know, he just embezzled a ton from him. So you'd be mean to someone who potentially stole the amount of money that they're talking about too. You wouldn't be too nice to him.
I don't know. I mean, I would probably just not keep them around. I don't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't keep them around like that, but you know, this is Star Wars, and
I wouldn't keep them around and use them because I'd be so fucking mad every time I saw them. It would remind me, and I'd be like,
it's literally like I said. It was just there was I think one or two where they kept doing it, and I at that point was like, well, it's like the fourth time they brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing. Now this I loved. Now I've read a couple of reviews. Some people are mixed on this, but for me, look, you say what you will as far as, you know, baby Yoda love, but I loved everything that he did in this episode. I did. I know it was a lot of comedy. I know some of it was a little ridiculous and a little over the top, probably more so than any other episode, but I loved it. I didn't mind any of it. From him helping fix the ship, which I couldn't stop laughing. I was laughing my ass off, to him stealing the treats from the kid's desk, to
like what the actual real world sleeve of macaroons that he had.
To having, which I thought, I love. Glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what that was. To him having to go to school, and then finally him joyriding in the ship, putting his hands in the air and just having a good damn time, and then puking, you know, at the end. I liked it all. I didn't mind any of it. There's a few, I did see a few gripes online. Some people thought it went overboard, but for me personally, I loved it.
I not only didn't think it went overboard, I think that it's showing in the last couple episodes, we're talking about him growing, him becoming, you know, learning and not being as much of just a blob. I think that as this season has progressed, each episode he's like a sponge. He is learning so much in each episode, and although he's having fun, you know, the Mandalorian communicating with him, and although dude, and like you said, I was dying laughing when he was just like, put the red cord, no, don't touch the cords. That whole sequence is, you know, trying to explain basically to a toddler how to do something, but he was picking it up. He was learning very quickly. And I think that is speaking to the, race of being he is. I don't know. But,
because they're kids for like 50 years.
Yeah. So for it to feel like he has grown exponentially in a short period of time, is kind of crazy, because they have made a big point about how they're a kid for a very long time. So I think that speaks volumes to him.
Well, yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say something about that myself. I was curious because, you know, like, we didn't really have a good gauge as an audience, like, you know, because most of the fans refer to him as Baby Yoda. Disney refers to him as the child. So I'm like, okay, so approximately, like, how old is this creature? Well, not how old is Baby Yoda, but like, what's his level of being able to communicate with others or understand what you're saying? And we got a good gauge of that right now. And is it the sort of thing where he has matured a lot over this, or has he just gained a better understanding of how to communicate, with the Mandalorian and other people that are speaking, whatever the Star Wars version of common or basic or what have you is, but
It's
yeah,
called English.
like, but yeah. Also, I didn't think it was too much. And like you said, I think it showed growth on his part. How they've grown into their roles. As sort of I guess sort of a family there, because also we have the scene where like I said, he spits up the macaroons, and the Mandalorian just automatically, without hesitation, reaches for his cape and like wipes down his face and everything. Just like it's sort of like any dad kind of would. Like, whereas a lot of people who haven't been parenting for as long as he has now would be like, oh God, what do I do about this at the moment? Trying to find a cloth or anything. He's just like, he's probably so used to having, food spit on him or being in a mess due to the fact that he's essentially raising a toddler, that he's like, whatever, I'll just wipe it up with my cape.
Or even he'll eat in front of the child now. You notice they had the one scene where he's lifting his mask ever so slightly, where you can see the bottom of his face to sip his soup.
Well, I was very surprised that, because I thought it was going to lead to this. I thought, because they are essentially, based on his code as a Mandalorian and everything, they're family at this point, meaning that at this point in time, until the child is delivered, that, or at least how I take it, the child is a Mandalorian, so technically he can take his helmet off if it's just him and Baby Yoda in the ship. That doesn't go against their code, as far as I know. At least from what the Forge Master was saying.
Yeah, I'm not completely clear on what their extreme code, their code is. I'm sure we'll get more of that this season. I would think we would. Maybe the Forge Master returns, or another one of his Watch clan or whatever appears.
Yeah, maybe he's a little fuzzy on the rules himself.
He might be.
He's like, so can I take off my helmet? It's like, yes, it's your child.
There's a scene. So there's been a lot of talk about backdoor pilots this season, and there clearly now, I think there is a pattern to it. We don't know what's going to get greenlit, what's not going to get greenlit, what exactly Disney's planning. We know December 10th, Disney has announced there's a major event that's going to have major announcements. Supposedly it's going to be the biggest thing this year in terms of Disney telling us what the future of Disney Plus is and other things like that. So the assumption is they're going to announce the future of Star Wars on Disney Plus. We saw Boba Fett introduced at the end of episode 1. One of the rumors is a Boba Fett show. We saw Bo-Katan. There's a rumor about her maybe getting a show. And then the end of this sort of set up this sort of potential Marshals type show. We see a badge being left by a New Republic pilot. Speaking of real quick, the Republic pilots, since they're acting as basically cops on the Outer Rim now, I would hope they'd get better uniforms. They're just wearing their flight gear. Yeah. It sort of bugged me that he was just wearing his flight gear. And I didn't like the way it looks. and plus, it's the rebellion. It's over. You're the New Republic now. Why are you keeping the exact same uniform as your rebel pilots? I don't know. It bugged me a little, but.
Well, yeah, because, back during the original movies, it kind of felt like, okay, they're using what they have, but now it...
Exactly. It's like, no, you won.
Now it feels like, yeah, exactly. It feels like they got a budgeting problem or something now, because they should have new uniforms.
Yeah, it's just something. But anyways, he leaves a badge. Cara Dune's talking about different things, and there have been rumors that there's consideration of a show that she could possibly be in. There's been 2 or 3 different rumors about that. One involving her as a team. Then there was one that maybe it was just her, and then based on the fact that she is a marshal, it got me thinking. The first episode was titled The Marshal because Timothy Oliphant's character was a marshal. And could they be potentially setting up a marshal series on the Outer Rim. And another reason this got me thinking that was I know with the New Republic publications coming up, it's going to be books and comics. That is one of the storylines they're doing is sort of these Outer Rim marshals. So that's on the brain at Disney right now. They are thinking of that type of thing. But this sort of go ahead.
I was just going to say you're going to get a cease and desist in about, probably
like, whoa.
Probably a week after this lands. Once the title "Marshals of the Outer Rim" leaks, Star Wars Marshals of the Outer Rim.
It feels like they may be setting that up. Now, there's potential that with all of these shows that they don't greenlight any of them, or they change it up, or we don't know. We really don't know. But to me, that felt like a setup.
It does. It really does. Seeing how we had that earlier in the season, and now we have her getting the badge and everything, and there's a lot of talk about how they're kind of how they don't know what they're doing in the Outer Rim, and they can't really police it well or anything. So it seems like that's potentially where Disney's going with another show.
Would that show be interesting? Let me ask that question.
You can do a lot with it. I mean, because so much of the Outer Rim is either unexplored or
Would you have a central villain like running crime, or how would you do that if that was in fact what they were going for?
You could have a central cartel, like the Hutt cartels, or what's the name of that cartel that kind of doesn't exist anymore due to now the fact that it's Star Wars Legends. Well, you could have that, or you could have the one from the movies. You could have those guys. Their genesis.
The one that Han
was dealing with. Yeah,
that's true. What do you think, Spencer?
I think that it would make sure I wasn't muted. I think that it would be an interesting way to kind of show the underworld side of Star Wars, but I don't think that it's necessary because that's kind of what the Mandalorian's already doing. Now, if they wanted to take it a different route, once they started kind of getting, him exploring some other things, but right now it's the Western, underworld side of Star Wars. So I don't think that they need another show that basically explores the same shit, just like we were talking about in one of the previous reviews, that when you do a Mandalorian show, you don't need 7 Mandalorian shows. They would all be exploring the same kind of thing. So I think that if they do it, I think that's going to show us that the Mandalorian's going a different route, which is okay. But I don't know that we need 3 things exploring the same content.
Oh, I get what you're saying, because it would still be they would still both be Westerns in a way. Yeah, true.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Like I said, these rumors have been around for a while as far as what show. The only shows we know are confirmed that Disney has said, yes, we're doing that, is the Obi-Wan show and the Cassian Andor show. Those are 2 that they've said, yeah, we're working on those. But as far as all the stuff that's supposedly spinning out of The Mandalorian Season 2, none of that's been confirmed. Although the way this season is playing, I think a lot of those rumors, there's definitely some truth to them, just the way they're shooting things. But like I said, December 10th, we should have some answers by that date, which is not far. A lot going on that day. Cyberpunk drops on December 10th.
The Cassian Andor stuff, that is or to what this is already exploring too. So you're already that's kind of the spy version of, I guess, Star Wars. But so I guess it's different, but I think that it would probably be it will be covering different things, but it'll be shot very similarly, which is not but it's, like you said, a Western. I think it'll be, unless they shoot it more like a Jason Bourne type.
I think that's the goal. I don't know. Unfortunately, that show has gone through a lot of issues as far as writing and people leaving, and I don't think they know what they want to do with that show. Because at the end of the day, they set it up in Rogue One. Cassian Andor is willing to kill innocent people if it gets the job done. He's that kind of character, yet he serves the rebellion. I don't know if Disney, but then again, the Mandalorian kills a lot of people all the time. I mean, I don't know if that's what their hang up is about the character.
I don't know.
What?
Or him and Cara Dune killed a shit ton of people.
So yeah, I don't know, but
Well, I'll say this much about the Marshall show or any other show that's on the Outer Rim or dealing more with crime. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Western. It could be something more akin to, like let's say a Fargo, but in space. You could get things from different perspectives of the different cartels. You could have their perspective as much as you would have a perspective of a Cara Dune or the Marshal from earlier in the season.
I
You could
don't
have different crime families and things that you're dealing with.
I don't disagree with you. And they talked about before this season started that they are going to do kind of like Star Wars, Game of Thrones. Favreau said that he wants multiple storylines kind of all tying together, which would be a way to do that. Like, I don't disagree. But, speaking of Game of Thrones, each individual like storyline was different until the end. So you look at, Jon Snow, it was always wintry. You look at, Cersei and all them, it was always summer and hot. But then you look at someone like Daenerys, it was always like on the water or so. So as long as they do it to where it's like at different settings, I guess, to where it feels different, I wouldn't have any issue with it. I just don't want the same feeling watching 8 different shows and it all feel the same.
Oh, so maybe you'd want it to be like on a more sort of industrial world or more on like a more established world like a Coruscant where you're getting more city or something instead of like you're getting these dusty outer rim towns and stuff.
Yeah, it would feel very much like what
you
we're
need a
watching.
visual difference. You think, and I don't disagree. Each show needs to have its own look, its own destination or destinations, and a visual style even to some degree to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, and then in the end, you would have them all tie together because either Moff Gideon is, basically like we alluded to, the Emperor and Moff are trying to restart the Empire. Then you're like, oh shit, let's go get Ahsoka. Let's go get the rest of the Mandalorians. Let's go get, all these marshals and get all their people. You need a big bad guy, similar to like all the Marvel movies. You have, all these movies that are individual unto themselves, but they all felt different. And then they all, at the end, got together and tried to defeat this one big bad guy. And I think with Moff Gideon, they've established what he's doing is going to take more than just the Mandalorian.
And he's a solid villain that I think could be an overarching villain for the franchise if they want to go that route.
And I think that would be a great way to do it. I just need, none of the Marvel movies feel the same. I think, like you said, a visual difference or a style difference of some sort to kind of establish that they are different and not just all rehashed.
Well, yeah, and that makes sense. And, it would make sense for him to be involved in a show like that because with the Empire, being pushed away from the core worlds and everything, it would make sense that they're trying to not only do the things that we see in this show, but that they're trying to, gain new territory in the Outer Rim, so that they would be a faction that you'd have to deal with, when you're, besides the groups we just mentioned, such as cartels and whatnot, and also for worlds or areas that are worlds that are the same that you have visited before in the Mandalorian. Yeah, you're seeing areas that the Mandalorian would visit now. So if you do go to the same world at certain points, maybe you see a different part of it. Because it's an entire world, So maybe there are different cities that he doesn't even visit with an entirely different feel or something. But then again, they may not do that because
Star Wars. Every
it's
planet
Star Wars.
has one.
It's a sand planet.
Ecosystem,
It's a frost planet. Yeah,
that's been their way. That's true. Yeah, I only got one last thing to say, and then we, whatever you guys want to talk about. But that shot, I think there was 6 minutes left on the episode. 3 of those were credits, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, all right, the episode's wrapping up, and then you get that ship, that big ass like Star Destroyer type ship, and I'm like, ooh, and I immediately was like, oh shit, that's Gideon's ship. It looked a little different. I don't know if that's something that's been seen in Rebels or Clone Wars or anything. I'm not familiar with that particular design. it looked unique. I wish we had gotten a better angle because I'm sure you can probably look it up online, and I'm sure they'll sell a toy of it or model. But when I saw the ship and then the interior of the ship and everything, that was a very the child in me just smiling, like, oh, this is so cool, and then seeing Gideon there, the door opens and his officer comes in to see him, and just the way all that was done was a very nerd out moment for me. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it was very cool. It was
it up, and it does look like a Clone Wars Star Destroyer.
Their style, yeah, the older design, and that was one of my thoughts. I was like, is this an older design, or is this, what exact ship is he in? Because it's not OT Star Destroyer. It looks different than that, and it's definitely not as big as, say, Vader's ship.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was wondering that about the what appeared to be Death Trooper droids as well. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, are these like repurposed and are these repurposed droids for the Clone Wars, or some prototypes that they didn't have a chance to use or roll out that Gideon has acquired? I was wondering that myself. Like, is this old tech that they're modifying in some way? And that'd be a neat thing to see.
I was saying that would make the most sense, Larry, because look at what he's doing with the Razor Crest. Like, that's a ship that's older.
Clone Wars, yeah.
So I think that Gideon's doing the same thing that he's doing.
Well, also the whole, I mean, and this works story-wise and character-wise for the Mandalorian because, his, droids, he has that fear and hate of droids. So these elite droids that could be repurposed from that era coming after him and him having to deal with them, I think works.
Ooh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
That works perfectly, that Gideon's using that. And also, I think, Larry, you nailed it when you said, what have they shown could be a threat to Ahsoka at this point? You need some kind of new threat, and I think that's what they're creating with this. Because she is anyone who, I mean, I'm sure most people who listen to us probably are familiar, but if you're not, she's on the level of an Obi-Wan or an Anakin. She's that tier of a Jedi. Her fighting abilities.
I mean, yeah, she held her, like, spoilers. If you haven't watched Star Wars Rebels, but I mean, she fought Darth Vader and kind of held her own. So,
what?
Yeah.
The fuck?
Like, have you not seen that?
I would start that today.
But yeah, where were we at? Almost 50 minutes. Yeah, anything else you guys want to discuss about the episode, or what you think the future is, or anything Star Wars?
Well, I just want to say, yeah, if they're repurposing old tech, like, we think that's very cool. That's something we started to see in, like, their comics and whatnot. They've started doing, and it's something that I've always wondered, since the prequels came out and they started showing us all these, new, or should I say old designs for things and these ships that during the original trilogy we never saw any of these. My thought was always like, well, what happened to all that old stuff? That's still there. No one's repurposing that. No one's using what remains of those droids because they won the war, but they didn't destroy all the droids. They didn't destroy all the tech or anything. That's still out there.
Well, it's kind of like Periscope when they used that old naval ship, the old submarine, to take out the nuclear submarine.
I actually like that movie.
Yeah.
So it's just if that's what they're touching on, I'm glad that's something that the show is actually sort of diving into.
Anything, Spencer? Another reference, another obscure ass 90s movie reference.
I just wanted to say my feet are cold and I turned the space heater on. Fucking feet are freezing.
It's getting cold, dude. That time of year.
Yeah.
Next week's episode is directed and written by Dave Filoni. So all hands on deck.
We'll be in that one.
Yeah, gee, I wonder. Yeah. So anything else, guys?
Nah.
All right. Thanks for listening. Yeah, we'll be back next week with episode number 5 of season 2. And thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.